everyone. We are live on Facebook. And Myra, do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do.
Okay, Commissioner Windmiller, whenever you're ready.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to call a special Board of Commissioners meeting to order on Friday, March 19th, 2021 at 8:30 a.m. Myra, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Windmiller,
Present.
Commissioner Zimmerman,
Here.
Commissioner Brown,
Here.
Commissioner Simmons, Commissioner Costello,
Present.
Commissioner Cox, Commissioner Galladay,
Here.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Gladney,
Present.
Commissioner Beach.
Present.
And we do have a quorum.
Thank you so much. Actually, we're going to move immediately to executive session. So do I have a motion for the board to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing legal, confidential, or privileged matters as permitted under Bi-State Development Board Policy, Chapter 10, Section 10.080, D1 legal, D3 personnel, and D5 employee negotiations?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Zimmerman,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Windmiller,
Aye.
Commissioner Galladay,
Yes.
Commissioner Costello,
Aye.
Commissioner Gladney,
Aye.
Commissioner Simmons, Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
And just for the record, it appears Commissioner Simmons is participating. However, we have no audio or visual for that.
Commissioner Simmons is in the building. He just had to step out for a moment.
Okay, thank you.
We're ready to begin. Thank you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I will now call the meeting to order. Myra, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Zimmerman,
Here.
Commissioner Windmiller, Commissioner Simmons,
Here.
Commissioner Brown,
Here.
Commissioner Costello,
Present.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Galladay,
Here.
Commissioner Cox, Commissioner Beach,
Present.
Commissioner Gladney.
Present.
Were any public comments submitted for this meeting?
No comments were submitted.
Okay. I'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is the approval of the minutes of the January 22nd, 2021 AFA Committee open meeting. Minutes have been provided to everyone to review. Does anybody have any comments or proposed edits to these minutes? Hearing none, we'll need a motion to approve these minutes.
Motion.
So moved.
Second.
So all those in favor of approving the January 22nd, 2021 minutes, please signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Agenda item number 5 is the Bi-State Development Operating and Capital Budget. And we'll turn this over to Talby and Tammy Fulbright for comments.
I'm going to share my screen.
There we go. Great. I'm going to kick us off and then I am going to pass to Tammy. Thank you very much, Tammy. So commissioners, what we have before you, of course, is our FY22 budget. And all during this process in a parallel basis, we, of course, are meeting with the leadership from all three of our funding partners, including one-on-one meetings with St. Clair County Transit District, with the budget directors of the county, both from the executive office and with the council, and of course with our colleagues at St. Louis City. We really appreciate your patience with this very complex budget. And one of the reasons why it is complex is, of course, the impacts of the federal funding and how we insert that appropriately. Because of course, it has to be inserted differently as it is in Missouri and Illinois, simply because of the difference of how our funding works. And obviously with Missouri being largely sales tax based, and of course with Illinois enjoying the support of the state. And of course that means that we create a modified plan that allows credits to be given to St. Clair County Transit District, so that they are not penalized essentially for the state support that they have. And that is going on in the background. But unfortunately, it does mean that some of this presentation may look a little strange. But what I can assure you is that those credits are done and are negotiated and are fairly accounted for. But overall, in our trending and looking at how we can operate our system effectively, I'm very, very pleased with this budget, and indeed more pleased with how the trajectory has gone on over a period of time. As you can see, since I arrived at this organization and I've worked with this board to essentially chart a new course of level growth rate. And as you can see, this is now my third fiscal year to negotiate, and our 3-year average growth rate, which is represented in this chart in the green line, is roughly 1.5%. This kind of trending is critical for us so that we are essentially delivering transit service that is in line with the revenues that we're expecting for a Midwestern city of our composition. So keeping a growth rate that is in line with where sales tax and general economic growth is critical for us to create the stability and the economic vibrancy that our region is asking for. So I'm very proud of this budget, and I am very proud, of course, of all the staff's hard work to maintain this level growth. As we move into this next year, we will be talking about what are the impacts associated with the ARP. So that is the next round of federal funding associated with the recovery. But we can talk about that more as we get into the capital items. But right now, I will be handing this over to Tammy Fulbright to largely walk you through our new CFO. Tammy, thank you.
Thank you and good morning. So I'm going to start out with this screen, which is the statement of activity for transit. And I want to bring your attention to that first column, the way it's labeled as COVID budget 2021. If you remember, and if you were with us last March, we presented our original 2021 budget, but as that was happening, COVID was actually unfolding at the same time. And so between that committee meeting and the actual board meeting in April, we actually went back to the table and created what we called the COVID adjusted budget for 2021. The main difference for that budget was that we added $7.5 million for expense for COVID. And then we really just kind of changed where the buckets of revenue were coming from. We adjusted passenger revenue by 40%, sales tax by 20%, and the Fed was reducing rates. So we also adjusted interest income. So that gave us our new COVID budget 2021. When you look at budget 2022, what you'll see is that we've made some modest reduction for service. So you see revenues are down about $5.5 million, and then we're showing expense down about $5.1 million. This next slide is basically focusing in on transit operating expense. And what I want to mention here is as you look at this first section and you see wages and benefits, you'll see that 5.1 million, which is the reduction in service, but then an increase of 7.7 million for services. Primarily what that is made up of is $5 million for the St. Louis County police contract, which in past years we've included in our budget. In recent years we have not, but in 2022 we are including that $5 million contract back in our budget. In addition, we have $1 million in additional expanded security services, approximately $700,000 in contracted ADA services, which is offset somewhat by wages and benefits, $450,000 for COVID expense for cleaning, and then another $250,000 for mobility alternatives. So that is the increase of that 7.7 million. The $1.5 million decline in fuel is mainly related to services. And then the other line item I want to draw your attention to is other operating expenses. So when you look at the COVID budget 2021, you see that it's at 14.8 million. That's where we put the placeholder for the additional expense of 7.5 million for COVID. So that's why you see that difference there between 21 and 22. This slide is really to help bring your attention to the two budget years and compare apples to apples. So this next section is basically backing out some big items like the COVID expense we added for 7.5 million. In 21, we knew we had additional increase for non-capitalized projects of 1.1 million. And then we were planning for additional service in St. Clair County for approximately $5 million. So we backed that out. That gets you back to the 303.4 million you saw in that first slide with the trends here, and then also brings you to the 312.2 that we're showing there. And just for the purposes of the slide, we are going to leave the 312.2 million as our number for 2022, but I just did want to bring attention to the St. Louis County police contract, as that's a big number. And I just wanted to bring attention to that with this slide. The next slide is just the pie chart, basically breaking out those operating expenses by percent. And as you can see, the most dominant expense we have is wages and benefits, and that's impacted by our negotiated contracts, our labor contracts, and then also benefits. And this funding partner slide. So this is where it does get kind of complicated, but this slide and this pie chart is really representative of the operating portion of the budget. So where did our funding come from for the operating portion of the budget? So for St. Louis City and County, those numbers that you see there show a 10% discount. St. Clair County is shown at 64 million, which is the full contract amount. But as Toby mentioned, that has to do with the difference in the way they're funded. So we have allocated funding between the two states to account for that. So now we're moving into the capital projects. As you can see, for our budget this year, we have $595 million for capital projects. 80% comes from federal funding, 20% local funding. This pie chart here actually shows the different federal funding that we receive for these projects, primarily state of good repair and formula funds 5307. It's important to note the 5307 funds also are, that formula is the formula used on how we get our additional funding, such as CARES and CRISA, and the new funding program that we're in the process of determining now. This pie chart is showing our local funding, which is primarily our funding partners, so St. Clair County Transit District, St. Louis City and County, and then also portions of operating budget as needed. And then finally, this pie is actually showing all the different uses and project types that we use, primarily for infrastructure in the upcoming 3 years at 26.8%, vehicles and supporting equipment at 24.5%, and then future rail projects at 28.1%. And then finally, this is basically letting you know what some of our major projects are for the next 3 years. So we have revenue and rolling stock replacement of 110 million. And this also includes our electric buses. We have a project that we're working on for light rail vehicle upgrades and replacement of 125.2 million, which includes 24 LRVs. The Union Station Tunnel project of 56.8 million. Metrolink infrastructure improvements, which can include a lot of different types of projects that we do. And those can include bridges, elevators, escalators, parking lots, tunnel repairs, and other station enhancements. In addition, facility infrastructure improvements at 32.4 million, and then safety and security initiatives at 21.4 million, which is radio system upgrades and CCTV expansions. So here we have a couple pictures of the different infrastructure for the electric buses, and then also our electric buses that we're very proud of. And then finally, the Delmore Loop and Forest Park TOD. I don't know if there's any comments before I go into the tourism innovation, or keep moving. Okay. So we'll move into the arch as the first item. And again, when we created the COVID budget for 2021, we were very conservative. So we thought at that time, I think through June of 2020, we were projecting that we would be at 50%, only a 35% reduction from July to September. And then for October through November, or October through June of that year, we thought we would only have a 20% decline. That is not what the impacts of actual COVID were, but we were very early in the process when we prepared this budget. So now looking at 2022, we have a better picture of what we think we will see in the future. We're currently operating at about 20% capacity, and we are expecting that in the summer months, what we will do is we'll run one tram, and basically what we do is each family has their own car. And we'll continue that process. In October, we're hoping to be able to run 2 trams, again with one family in each car, and that should get us to about 40 to 50% capacity. The other thing that's impacting the 22 budget is that in the summer months, we will be operating at 3 hours less per day. So that shows some impact there. And so what we're seeing for 22 is actually a deficit of $3 million, but after depreciation, it's 3.5 million. Moving into the capital budget. So they have the Tucker Theater, which is one major project that they want to work on. It's approximately $8 million. Right now, we're showing the sources of fund as the J&EM beneficial fund, but we know that we have had discussions of possibly issuing bonds. And in addition, there's some grant funding that may be available for this project. So as they move closer into moving forward with this, we'll look more closely at the funds that will be needed to actually get this project done. For the riverboat.
Excuse me, Tammy.
Yes.
I have a question about the theater. Wasn't that, would that have been not renovated during the overall renovations of the arch grounds?
It was not. So this was something that's been in the works, and they have been discussing it for some time. But yes, it wasn't part of that.
Just curious. Thank you.
Okay.
It was not. And just one very quick comment, Terry, and to the entire board. You know, Tammy mentioned that we would maybe look at bonding opportunity there, really almost because of cost of funds. Cost of funds is so very low right now that it may make sense for us to look at that. For instance, in the case of the arch, they're very well capitalized and in great shape, but more for kind of a longer term stability, it may make sense for us to look at that. And we are having those discussions currently with our partners at the National Park Service.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Tammy.
Sure. So then moving on to the riverboats, in 21, our COVID budget showed a deficit of about 122,000. We're expecting that deficit to be closer to 233,000 in 22. And that is representative of our hope of 1,123 cruises and hopefully 272 days of operation. Moving into the airport, what we're seeing there is that they had a small deficit projection last year of around 21,000. This year, the projection's actually positive income of 282,000, and where they're finding most of that was in wages and benefits and other reductions that they've made. If you look after depreciation, the deficit is close to 1.2 million, and they have several capital projects that they need to do over the next few years. Looking at 22, the two major ones that we know are the run-up ramp and then also the terminal. So you see the run-up ramp at 5 million and the terminal at 2.6 million. When you look at the top, it shows sources of funds as federal and state, and then airport and other funds. So as we move into 22, we'll look to lock down those funds and actually be prepared for those projects as they begin.
Just as a brief comment, thank you, Tammy.
Sure.
So of course, those are major projects that are associated with the Gulfstream negotiation, which is going on right now. I think it looks very positive that we'll have a consolidated lease agreement, a 10-year lease agreement with Gulfstream. And of course, that is the critical linchpin to getting some of the state funding associated and St. Clair County associated funding with supporting those projects. And that is looking optimistic. But of course, those projects are contingent on that lease execution. And I believe we're about 95% there, just about have it all negotiated. And so that's the relevant piece to that program. And of course, finding stability for the airport.
I know there's a lot of ARA funding going to airports nationwide. Is that any of that factored in here or?
So yes, one of the major pieces actually in the case of the downtown airport, since it's a general aviation airport, we're using IDOT as the conduit, Terry.
Okay.
So there is some associated funding through the aeronautical portion of IDOT, but I'm a little bit in the deep water there. Of course, we're just asking our legislative partners for some help there, and we've been very successful at that. I will tell you that the Costello Group has been very helpful in negotiating these pieces, both on a state and federal level. I think we're very close, and there are some portions of federal aeronautical funding that would be supporting this grant.
The Division of Aeronautics at IDOT is very easy to work with.
Exactly, that's who they are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so for Freightway in 22, we actually are budgeting net income of 30,000. So for revenue, what we're seeing is some possible grant funding there, and then also from our jurisdiction, counties and cities, some revenue or fees there that will support the Freightway. So that's leaving us with a net income of $30,000. Moving into executive services. So executive services and the administrative fees there are being impacted by the ARCH revenue, and so we're basically budgeting a break even there. So covering the expenses we have and showing that the Gateway Arch is down, both for their the fees that we get directly related to that, and then the National Park Service fees, as you see there. And moving into internal service funds. So these are budgeted basically break even also. And what you see there for the participant contribution, the employees, they contribute about 20%. By state contributes the other 80%. And that's mainly there to cover administrative costs and claims for the year. For casualty, same thing. The revenue that we see there and the administrative fees are to cover the premium insurance and then also the claims there. And finally, workers' self-insurance. We have operating of actual total revenue of 7.7, with operating expense claims being the majority of it at 6.6 million, breaking even also for workers' self-insurance fund. Finally is arts and transit. So the revenue source there is in-kind contributions by BSD, and then advertising to cover the expenses that we have there, which are primarily materials and supplies, and then help that we pay for outside services for those projects. So today our recommendation is for a recommendation to the board for approval of the FY22 operating budget, the 22 and 20 through the 24 capital budget, the 3-year TIP, and then also the grant resolutions to apply for federal and state funding for these projects. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a
Tam, go ahead, Terry.
for Toby, Jessica, Tammy, whoever. to summarize, local funding sources, St. Louis County by far is the largest of local funding, followed by St. Clair County, Illinois, and then the city of St. Louis. And I know you're meeting with the majors, players. That includes the St. Clair County Transit District. Their board has to approve their funding agreement with you.
Yes, sir, they do.
Shouldn't actual expenses charged to them be decreasing based on the fact that we're only now providing service to 11 of the 18 fixed routes due to service reductions? Is that correct, or that's all part of the negotiations?
So there's no question that there is some reduction in service associated with what this current budget is, but there certainly has been some impacts having to do with COVID. And of course, one of the major pieces of the overall funding and what we're getting from federal support is to avoid layoffs and try to keep service levels consistent. So it depends, Terry, on what the objective is. If the objective of the transit district is to save money, then we need to move our budgetary objectives to that. Okay, now, and inevitably that would mean some reductions, as I would point out in the major pie pieces of what makes up our budget. It's mostly based in labor. Okay, so one of the taskings that we had under the COVID budget was to avoid layoffs, and those are, of course, the objectives that we're following from St. Clair County, the city, and the county. If the objective is to essentially save revenue, that's a different set of objectives, because we have obviously some embedded fixed costs associated with rolling stock, embedded fixed costs that is associated with facilities, and therefore it's difficult for us to move our budget within 1 year period just based on eliminating routes. Okay, if what the objective of St. Clair County is indeed to just save money, then that is a different tasking of this agency. So it's complex. Part of the problem is indeed fixed cost. The second is that there's significant impacts associated with COVID, and that most of these budgetary effects fall over a several year period of time. So one of the things is that some of these deltas, some of the efficiencies that would be led from eliminating some routes will not be realized until some period of time. And also we have been using some of the effects of COVID, and for instance, on the revenue side, there's several different tranches of effects, one of which is sales tax, which is not as relevant to St. Clair County Transit District because the pass-through is through the district and we don't see that directly like we do in Missouri. However, there is a discernible effect on passenger revenue. And so then we try to make up passenger revenue through COVID and so on. So what I guess I'm saying is that the budget and the movement of budget for an organization of our size is difficult and takes time. And also it's an extraordinary difference associated with, what are the effects of COVID. And I'm not going to tell you that I know all the effects of COVID yet. Some of them are showing up this year. I think some of them will show up next year. What we do need to do, though, is figure out, what the district is asking us to do. In the end, our end product is service, and how much service can we put out as efficiently as possible. And if, for instance, we are going to just eliminate a route, unless we are also tasked with then eliminating jobs and the infrastructure associated with that it's hard for us to realize the financial benefit of that in that existing year. Okay, and those are effects that tend to happen over time. As I've tried to make really apparent in the financial stewardship associated with this, what is more important is to look at what our trend line is. Okay, our effective transit over time. And a growth rate of 1.5% is a big victory associated with some of the fixed costs that we have. And I would expect the same kind of results of some service reductions to be apparent within St. Clair County Transit District as well.
And you'll be talking to Mr. Sharkey.
Of course, yes. So not only do I talk to Mr. Sharkey, but of course I assign staff, and I know Tammy is always available to sit down with Ken and go over these issues. Unfortunately, they're very, very complex. We try to do our best to boil them down to, kind of more simplified issues so that we come to those policy decisions. But it's a very, very good question, Terry. It's relevant and it's one that should be discussed. And I'm happy to discuss with the full Transit District Board as well at their discretion.
Thank you.
Mr. Roach, if I may just make a comment on service level.
Mm-hmm.
So effective this past Monday, March 15th, Commissioner Beach, we are operating system-wide, this isn't broken down by state, 89% of our pre-pandemic Metrobus service package and 94% of our pre-pandemic Metrolink service package. We'll be happy to detail that for you in our next operations committee.
That'd be great. Tom, one final thing. I know Fred and others have questions. We still have that early buyout incentive?
Yes, so that's going on literally right now, and it's going very well. One of the objectives of that, and we'll be discussing some of these issues associated in executive session, is that we are looking at trying to get as efficient as possible and move essentially into a situation where we don't have as much employment. And just trying to be as efficient as possible, but still deliver service. That's the difficulty, is that we are also retiring a lot of good and talented people, and some have to be replaced. So we're looking at that tension right now, and it's going well. That's one of the reasons why we're able to sustain this level growth rate. We should be looking at that every single year and looking at the individual areas of the company to do so. And part of that will come up today and later in this AFA presentation.
And that only applies, though, the buyout to non-bargaining unit people, correct?
Correct. That it's management and executive oriented. And it allows us to relook at some of that talent and also repopulate it with new job descriptions that are closer to the kind of service levels that we're talking about offering. You may have noticed in the budget, for instance, a shift to some of the services that are offered. That has to do with some of the Metro Reimagined moves that Jessica and her team have gone with some of the individual and has happened actually in St. Clair County as well, where some services have been shifted over to these, for instance, contracts with VIA and so on. So we will see some of that in the modernization of what our transit approach is. Again, trying to move towards efficiency where we're concentrating our service in the service that's most efficient. So that's largely, so you'll see some of those budget shifts, especially over time.
Thank you.
Tammy, I'm looking at the slide, transit operating expenses, and I'm looking at the ratio of wages to benefits. And help me with this, and it may be my misunderstanding this. Do we spend approximately 75 cents on benefits for every dollar of wages?
That percent is generally around 40%. So I may have to look at that further and I can get you a better answer on that. We have workers' comp also included within our benefits range. So I can get you a more detailed answer.
Yeah, that would be helpful to me because I was surprised to see benefits so high relative to wages. I would have expected it to be a significantly lower percentage. So it would be helpful if you could follow up with me offline and help me understand that. Thank you.
Okay, I definitely will.
Any other questions? Any other comments?
Yeah, I got one. Toby, we had done some talking in the past about the riverboats. Is there any updates on that project?
So I will be coming to the board on a greater analysis of the riverboats, kind of more of a cost benefit basis. So I have started those discussions with, for instance, I need to bring it to an executive level to see, for instance, what is the appetite of our elected leaders for us to support that operation. Because there needs to be an understanding of how difficult it is. I will say, however, is as we are moving out of our COVID fog, the riverboats look to have one of their we are 100% on. I noticed that we are sold out on several of the cruises right now, which is, I know this is anecdotal and small, but for instance, as we're moving out of COVID, we do expect to have some very good years there. Additionally, Herb, we will include this more in a more detailed conversation with the National Park Service, because the riverboat inevitably supports all of the other operations of the Park Service. There's only so many people, for instance, that they can get at the top of the arch. So the idea is that there's we need other products for folks to, when they're going down there for a day, that they can enjoy. And the park benefits ultimately in a way from operating those riverboats. But they are a very difficult operation, and it's one that we should be looking much closer at. Herb, I'm just not going to be ready for that presentation until I get through budget season. But I do have the obligation to go over it and include it into the budget. So I don't expect to be ready in April, as I have a couple of other things to bring to you, and I don't want to pack the budget too full. But we are looking at it, and I'm continuing to pursue it.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hey, Tammy, could you go back to the final slide that shows everybody what we're actually voting on here, just so I don't have to read it all again?
Okay. Sorry. There we go.
There we go. Okay. So I need a motion to approve those items listed under agenda item number 5.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? That agenda item passes. We'll move on to agenda item number 6. It's a sole source contract for stockless office supplies, and Larry Jackson will explain this for us.
Greg Smithwell, good morning.
Well, hi, Greg.
Hi. The objective here is to present to the Audit, Finance, and Administrative Committee for approval and referral to the Board of Commissioners a request for authorization to extend the contract with Staples to provide stockless office supplies for a 5-year period. Rather extensive background here. In October 2008, Bi-State solicited proposals for qualified providers to satisfy the requirements associated with providing stockless office supplies to meet its office supply requirements on an as-needed basis. Following the evaluation process, we awarded the stockless office supplies contract to Corporate Express, which is now Staples. Stockless office supply period of performance consisted of 3 years, 1 base year and 2 option years. The period of performance for the base contract under the NJP agreement consisted of 2 years, which falls within Bi-State's 5-year contract maximum with a vendor. In December 2011, the then president and CEO of Bi-State signed a contract modification, which allowed Bi-State to continue using Staples as our office supply vendor through joining a purchasing alliance called National Joint Powers Alliance, NJPA for short, which is now Sourcewell. Sourcewell is a public agency established through Minnesota State statute in 1978 and serves as a municipal contracting agency for over 35,000 members throughout the nation. In February 2020, Bi-State Internal Audit conducted an audit of the stockless supply agreement and recommended the following actions. Procurement Department Management seek approval to update Board Policy 50 to incorporate policies regarding the use of contracts from purchasing alliances. Therefore, procurement is suggesting the following language to be incorporated into board policy. Our use of cooperative agreements satisfies the competitive procurement requirements and does not require BOC approval. The analysis for this was that the NJPA has nationally solicited, evaluated, and awarded contracts through competitive process on behalf of its members. Municipalities under the authority of NJPA enabling legislation and state procurement laws and or joint power authorities can leverage these contracts. These laws allow access to contracts and procurement process to satisfy our local state bidding requirements, avoiding duplication of process. It was the responsibility of Metro to interpret local purchasing laws to determine if we would be able to participate with NJPA contracts. The NJPA has an 11-step procurement process, which included the following: normal procurement process for us. As a result of the 11-step procurement process conducted, Staples Advantage was awarded contract 031210. Bi-State used the NJPA solicitation process result as a source selection criteria as justification for not issuing a new solicitation, and instead became a member of NJPA in 2012 in order to take advantage of the cooperative pricing via Staples for office supplies, which also includes copy paper. Copy paper period of performance was scheduled to expire April of 2012. Therefore, Bi-State terminated its individual copy contract with Staples in order to take advantage of the copy paper cooperative pricing agreement, which was very favorable to us. Past spend has been approximately $200,000 per year. Therefore, Bi-State anticipates the 5-year total spend to be approximately $1 million. Action requested: management recommends that the Finance and Administration Committee approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners for approval the request that the President and CEO authority to continue to utilize NJPA type agreements to purchase stockless office supplies from Staples at the favorable contract pricing, not to exceed $1 million. Funding sources are Bi-State's cost centers that have been allocated their budget for office supplies. Lots of history there. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions? I guess the totals, as he stated and as listed here, we think about $200,000 per year for 5 years, if anybody's interested. But yeah, we do need a motion to approve this. So do we have any motions to approve agenda item number 6?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? That item is approved. Agenda item number 7 is a contract award for third-party administrator claim services. And Chuck Stewart is going to handle this agenda item.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
I would like for you to approve a contract not to exceed $3.6 million over 5 years for the Thomas McGee Group to provide third-party administrative services for our workers' compensation and casualty claims. Tammy kind of talked about our expenses in this area. This is kind of a bittersweet situation for us. We have a team that is currently doing this, consisting of 10 people. Our claims costs in total are anywhere from 8 to 10 million a year. The purpose of this contract is to save costs in terms of administration, but also to provide additional resources, people resources, improve processes, improve technology to this very, very significant area in our budget, in our cost structure. So So that's the sweet part of it. We think that there were 4 proposers. The Thomas McGee Group is the highest ranked. In the bitter part of it is that we have a department of 10 people that we are basically eliminating. Part of this is the HERO program. We have 3 people in that department that are retiring. So that gave us an opportunity to look at this. We are retaining 2 people to support the outsourcing services, and there will be 5 layoffs, which we are providing for in the cost comparison in terms of the savings to be achieved. It is anticipated that just from administrative savings, that the first year savings will be $181,000, and thereafter savings will approximate about $230,000 a year. So we're eliminating administrative costs. We're eliminating in that some personnel costs, but we think that with improved efficiencies and effectiveness, that this is going to be a good thing for us moving forward. It is taking advantage of this HERO program, giving us an opportunity to improve and to change and to move forward. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
I've got a couple of questions, or I guess maybe partial comments. I'm all for saving money when we can, but this is a big risk area. So I want to make sure that's the primary focus, that if we think this is the best way, right, to not only save resources, but also, make sure we're mitigating risk and we're properly handling these claims. I don't think I work with any of these TPAs, but professionally, I work with a lot of them. So it's, some organizations handle it in-house, some handle it out. That's not that unusual. I guess I don't know if this is for Chuck or our legal counsel, but is this going to impact at all, our legal services or our legal counsel? Because obviously, if we've going through the TPA now versus in-house, it may not, but if that could be an aspect of this that we need to, make sure that's going to transition well and, not be an issue.
Well, basically, what we're hoping to achieve here is more efficiency in the claims settlement process, more timely settlement at better terms. The TPA will be using our current legal services. They will interface directly with them. But the bottom line is that we're going to have better equipped personnel. We're going to have better processes. We're going to have better technology focused on improving our claims experience.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, just to follow on your comment, Justin. So when you look at most of what's happening within the risk management and claims area, that we tend to carry over our recent past, we tend to carry claims for a very long period of time, and it kind of points to maybe a thought of where we're not gaining the most efficiency. So there's no question that there's risk with this shift, but we think it is a more modern approach, and it is an idea with trying to look at the organization and make us a little less bureaucratic. Chuck has done a great job of taking a look at this along with Kathy Britton, and I think it's a good move to move forward.
Great. We need a motion for this. So do we have any motions to approve agenda item number 7, the contract award for the third-party administrator claim services?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. The next agenda item, number 8, and that is the contract award for occupational medicine. I will note that a briefing paper has been provided already by Chuck Stewart and Andrew Giassi. I think they're available if anybody has any questions, but this is agenda item number 8. And then what's the, I guess, what's the bottom line dollar amount on this? I'm pulling it up now. Is it a 5-year contract for just over 1.5 million? Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Does everybody understand what this is or have any questions? It's pretty straightforward, and it's on page 145, 146 of the packet. But I don't have any, so unless somebody speaks up now, I'm just going to see if we have a motion on the floor.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of approving agenda item number 8, a contract award for our occupational medicine, signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Agenda item number 8 passes. Agenda item number 9 is board policy section 70.050, employees pension and 401k retirement savings plan. We have a chairperson appointment. Chuck Stewart will have comments on this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Under Board Policy 70.05, the Board of Commissioners appoints the chairperson to the Salary Pension Committee. We are currently without a chairperson. The committee has voted to nominate Charles Priskew as the new chairperson, and we need the board's approval of that. Mr. Priskew is one of our first retirees to serve on the Salary Pension Committee, and he was a longtime employee. His last position was Director of Labor Relations. He has served on this committee a number of years prior to his retirement. So it would be the recommendation of the Salary Pension Committee that the board appoint Charles Priskew to a 2-year term.
Any questions? That's pretty self-explanatory. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of the 2-year appointments for Charles Priskew, agenda item number 9, signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Agenda item number 9 passes. Agenda item number 10 is the contract awards for general legal counsel services. And I think Barb Enneking will give us a quick overview of this.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you. Yes, the measure today is to bring a request to the committee for their recommendation to the board to authorize to approve 3-year contracts and 2 1-year option contracts for legal services with selected firms in response that responded to a solicitation. As you know, every 5 to 6 years, we go out with an RFP for legal services for the agency. And so that solicitation was issued in November 13th of 2020, seeking proposals from qualified firms in 7 legal practice areas of general and corporate legal counsel, liability, subrogation, workers' comp, employment practices, labor and employment, and pension and benefits. And those proposals were all received on or before December 16th. And we received 66 proposals from 23 law firms. So after receiving those proposals, we had 7 evaluation committees that corresponded to the 7 practice areas to review these 66 proposals. And we evaluated them on a number of different criteria and selected the 16 firms that are on the attachment to the briefing paper, which cover the 7 practice areas. We're asking for a contract not to exceed amount of $9 million over the next 3 years, and then $6 million for the 2 option years. So we request that the committee recommend that the board approve contracts with these selected firms, these 16 selected firms for contracts over the next 3 years, 2 option years. So there are any questions about that, please?
I have a couple real quick, and I apologize. I wasn't here in November on the board yet when this RFP went out. So if I'm asking stuff that's already been asked previously, then that might be part of the issue. But for all these X marks I see on attachment 1, does that mean all of those firms in each one of those practice areas, their bids were sufficient per the RFP? Is that what that means?
Yes, that's exactly what it means, that we would negotiate with those firms for those practice areas.
So does this mean that will we still end up with, likely 1 firm per practice area, or is this that any of these throughout the term of this contract, any of these firms that have an X mark by them could potentially get work? Is that?
No, we generally have multiple firms per practice area, not just 1 firm.
Okay.
So that allows us to handle a breadth of work as well as having some flexibility with respect to the various firms.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then just a final, just general question: which one of these practice areas is the biggest driver of the expenses of the legal fees?
The biggest expense is really in the risk management area that's under Kathy Britton, which handles liability and workers' comp and subrogation. Those are by far the largest legal expense area for the agency.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted some help understanding this Excel sheet. Thank you.
Yeah, and we obviously, they spread those files around. I don't know how exactly they do it, but for conflicts and whatnot also. But I guess Barb, one comment that I remember this came up a few years ago, and maybe this will be considered going forward. But, I think one of the issues we've dealt with in the past is that we come to an agreement with a firm, and we think we're getting, we think we're getting Justin Zimmerman to do a lot of the work, and then Justin Zimmerman leaves that firm, goes to another firm, and we've still got a contract. So is that going to be? I know that was kind of an issue that's come up in the past. Is that going to be maybe considered with this, or have some type of way that we can have a mechanism to deal with that in this next batch?
Absolutely. Once the board approves the selected law firms, we will have a number of weeks in order to actually negotiate the contracts with the various firms. And so that is a consideration that we've put forward. And so the idea is to have the negotiations and get all the firms under contract so that we can start out with these new contracts in conjunction with our fiscal year of July 1st.
Sure.
If I can jump in, Justin, thank you. So as an example, on Workbench Comp, so we have almost 100 active cases, right? And so it's a big load. So we would have 3 firms that we rotate on based on expertise and so on. Now there's an exception to that if, for instance, if there's a claim that we have people who have multiple workman's comp claims. So in that case, we do try to keep them with the existing firm, right? Obviously, so that the same file is with them. But Kathy and her team, along with Barb, rotate to the 3 different firms in, for instance, a workman's comp basis based on expertise and if there is a related case. So just to clarify, that's generally how it is distributed. I hope that answered your question, Commissioner Gladney.
Yeah, it does.
Any other questions or comments about agenda item number 10? All right, hearing none, I'll request a motion to approve the contract awards for general legal counsel services.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Agenda item number 11 is our quarterly financial statement, second quarter, and this is for Tammy Fulbright.
Okay, So for December, I'm going to briefly just go through the different enterprises and give you an update of where they stood as of December. Executive Services was at a loss of $600,000. And as mentioned, that's primarily due to a reduction in arch revenues and the fees that we generally would earn from those revenues. For the Gateway Arch, they were down 2.1 million. And that's mainly due to the fact that they're running at 20% capacity. It's expected for the year that they'll be down 2.5 million. For the riverfront, we are at December, we were at 450,000 deficit. We're expecting the year loss for that to be 530,000. The airport, actually, they're showing a deficit of 231,000, but partially that is related to the fire that they had in 2020. And so we had some of those expenses coming through in 2021. And so that is part of the reason for that deficit there. For transit at December, we were running 5.5 million in deficit, and those funds will be reimbursed through the CARES funding. And so what we can note there is that as we know, passenger revenues down, and at that point it was down about 54%. And then we do see some reduction in expenses there too, but we're still at that 5.5. So we'll work to get that reimbursed through the CARES funding. The Freightway is actually showing income of 75,000, and that's because our funding partners, we have contributions from them, and so that is helping them with this year's budget also. So that's my report this morning. If there's any questions.
Any questions for Tammy? Well, this was just informational only, so if we've got all the information, we're just going to move on to agenda item number 12, which is the treasurer's report, and we're going right back to Tammy for that.
Okay, so I just want to briefly give an update there. So as of December, we had 200 million in self-directed funds, earning only 7 basis points average rate of return. Our trustee directed funds were at 55 million with a 0.86% average rate of return. And then just to focus on the fuel hedge for a moment, we are experienced, or as of December, we're experienced realized losses of 1.3 million, but that's offset by savings in the budget of 1.8 million. So the net savings is 500,000, which is basically telling you that the fuel hedge program that we are engaged in is working. That's the point, is that it helps us maintain within our budget, and that is working. One other item I just wanted to note is that S&P actually raised our credit rating from a AA- to a AA. So that was really good news for us. We still have a negative outlook, but it's moving in the right direction. So that's good news. Are there any questions for that part?
No, that's great news. Yeah, good stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, any questions or comments for Tammy on number 12? Again, informational only, no vote is needed. Agenda item number 13 is the procurement report. And I believe we've been provided a report on that. I think Greg Smith is available if anybody has any questions on that, but it's agenda item number 13. I'm going to pull it up right now and make sure I remember what it was on this. Yeah, Greg, unless there's something significant here, I don't have any questions. I'll let any commissioner ask if they do also, but I think the summary, it's a 2-page summary. It's pretty self-explanatory. Any questions or comments for Greg? All right, well, thanks for putting that together. We'll just, again, that's informational only. We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 14, pension plans, 401k, retirement savings program, or OPEB trust investment performance. And Chuck Stewart's going to give us an update as of the end of 2020.
Thank you, Commissioner Zimmerman. Again, this is for information purposes only. 401, as you know, our pension plans are basically funded through contributions from employees and the company and from investment earnings. So investment earnings are very, very important to the health of these plans. I'm going to start with the 401k plan. So the 401k plan assets as of December 31 were 77.2 million. A increase of 11.4 million over the period of time, $6.2 million in contributions, and $5.2 million in earnings. So our 401k plan remains healthy. Our participants are basically still investing in the vehicles that they have been in the past. For the salary pension plan, as of December 31, assets were $94.6 million. The key thing is that for the year, the portfolio earned 13.7 million as compared to the actuarial rate of return target of 7 million. So that was a good year for them. IBW, total assets are 7.4 million. Again, their portfolio gained 18.7 million as compared to the target of 7%, 18.7% as opposed to 7%. Our 788 pension plan, which continues to be kind of our problem situation, there were investment gains of 25.8 million during the year, but there were significant outflows. So actually our contributions less our expenditures for employees getting benefits, the expenditures were more. So without significant investment earnings, this plan would have significant problems. So it's a good thing that it gained 17.3% over the year, again, as compared to a 7% return expectation. And last but not least is our OPEB trust. The value at the end of the year was 47.7 million. The gain for the year in investment was 14.2%. And basically since inception in 2014, the portfolio has gained 6.6% in investment earnings as compared to the actuarial rate of return of 6%. So if there are no questions, that is my report on investment earnings for the year 2020.
Any questions or comments? Thanks for that update, Chuck. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Again, that's informational only, so we'll move on to agenda item number 15, which is an internal audit staffing update, and I think Crystal Mesner is available for comments on this.
Good morning, commissioners. Yes, because we have such a small audit shop, anytime I have a full-time vacancy, I just want to update the committee and let them know. So we have a senior internal auditor that took opportunity outside of BSD, and that leaves a pretty good gap for our quarterly required audits that we're conducting right now. But we are seeking a candidate. Also, we're working with a temporary agency to get a senior administrative assistant, which we successfully did this week, and they start next Monday.
Okay, well, thanks for the update. Does anybody have any questions or comments with respect to kind of what the current staffing update is for audit? All right, well, thank you. Simple enough. Again, that's just informational only. We appreciate you keeping us in the loop. I've got that we're on to agenda item number 16, which is the report of our president and CEO, Talby Roach.
Thank you, Commissioner Zimmerman. I'm going to keep this brief. I am working on the ARP analysis, so the next federal tranche of analysis, and I'm waiting for FTA's update. So, of course, we do get appropriation, but the key is that there's an allocation, and there will be a change from appropriation to allocation. We're working on that literally as we speak. It's moving nicely. Also, I'm working to counter the legislation in Missouri on concealed carry on transit. That's going well, and we have talked to several senators associated with that. And I am continuing in conjunction with that, the analysis on the BSD compact and potential changes. And we will have that proposal ready for the full board on April the 23rd. I know Barb is working in some aspects on a parallel basis. And I just want to, for the record, thank, of course, Commissioner Simmons and, for instance, Bernice Winters. We were able to run through 3 vaccination events in Illinois, vaccinated nearly 950 individuals, and that was very positive, and we continue to move along there. We're hoping to do one more a vaccination event in Missouri to balance things, and that's about where we are. And that concludes my remarks, and we'll try to go very quickly through the executive session as well. Thank you.
Great, good stuff, and congrats to Herb Simmons and St. Clair County again. That's a huge effort, and we appreciate it. If nobody has any other questions or comments, do we have any unscheduled business?
We do not. Thank you, sir.
Myra, could you call up the dates for future meetings?
Yes, our next meeting will be the Safety and Security Committee, which will be on April 8th at 8:30, followed by the Operations Committee meeting, which was rescheduled from today. That will be immediately following the Safety and Security. We also have a Board of Commissioners meeting scheduled for Friday, April 23rd at 8:30 a.m.
Great, thank you. Now we need to adjourn into executive session. I will need a motion that this committee go into executive session for the purpose of discussing legal, confidential, or privileged matters as permitted under Bi-State Development Board Policy Chapter 10, Section 10.080 D1 Legal, D3 Personnel, and D10 Audit.
So moved.
Second.
We will need a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Simmons,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Costello,
Aye.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Commissioner Galladay,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Gladney,
Aye.
Commissioner Zimmerman.
Yes.
The motion passed.
We're ready to begin again.
Great. The committee has reconvened to the open session. We've got 2 items up for vote. The first one is, do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the January 22nd, 2021 executive session of the Audit, Finance, and Administration Committee meeting as a closed record?
So moved. Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Galladay,
Yes.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Commissioner Costello,
Aye.
Commissioner Simmons,
Yes.
Commissioner Gladney,
Aye.
Commissioner Zimmerman.
Yes.
The motion passed.
Do I have a motion to approve the Internal Audit Department's fiscal year 22 budget as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Costello,
Aye.
Commissioner Galladay,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Zimmerman,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Simmons,
Yes.
Commissioner Gladney,
Aye.
Commissioner Beach.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Great. If there's nothing else, no further business, can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
All right. Well, I will second that. I don't think we need a vote. And everybody, thanks for hanging in there during a budget meeting, and have a good weekend.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good
Big
weekend.
issues to get through. Really appreciate it.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.